And now, here's Dialogue, a podcast with Gene Richard from Kbze 105.9 FM. Today's show is being sponsored by
Heather Hendrix here, candidate for Lafourche Parish Judge Division A. This is a Lafourche Parish-wide election, from the Fouchon to the St. John, up, down, and across the bayou. For the past 8.5 years, I've worked for you as a Lafourche Parish Assistant District Attorney, prosecuting thousands of defendants. And I've had over 75 jury trials, including the death penalty. So please vote for me on November 8th. Heather Hendrix, number 59. Remember, justice delayed is justice denied. Paid for by the committee to elect me, Heather Hendrix, your next judge.
And welcome, listeners, on a beautiful afternoon here in front of the courthouse. Welcome to Dialogue, Kbze 105.9. I know we're out here enjoying the afternoon, enjoying the sun, and isn't it great? And I got a candidate for Judge Division A with me this afternoon, Miss Heather Hendrix. Miss Heather, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me on this beautiful day.
I hope you got her Cajun accent.
Golden
the thickness of it just amazes me, and I don't understand, but I hope you as a listener got that, because I'm sitting right next to it, and it's so thick it's just bleeding over into me. I mean, Heather gives me the frisson so bad I almost want to cry.
I hear you. You got it on me for
it. Heather is a Cajun. She's been here long enough. She qualifies as one.
Thank you so much.
She's got a story, and of course we're teasing, and she's not from here originally. And I guess I got to ask you, how did you find your way from Monroe? Shreveport, I'm sorry.
From Monroe.
Shreveport all the way down to Thibodaux.
Well, I haven't lived in Shreveport since I graduated high school in 1988, but it's just something that is just in my blood. It's not going to come out. Or maybe it's a side effect of COVID. I don't know. But for some reason, it seems to be getting stronger, my accent, that is. I graduated from Tulane Law. I taught 8th grade in the public schools for 11 years. And then at 36, I went to law school, graduated from Tulane Law in New Orleans, and I worked for the Orleans Public Defender's Office, learned a whole lot there. Worked for Martin Regan and Associates out of Orleans Parish, where I went all over the state. Every Saturday we would meet and put out the week calendar and see who was going where. I would put 800 miles a week on my truck driving across this state. But after the first time I came to Lafourche Parish, I would fight on Saturday mornings to come to Lafourche, because I called it peace on the bayou. I need some peace on the bayou, because everyone was so nice and lovely to work with. And I'd park right over there on the bayou side when I had court, and I'd walk past the DA's office and I'd point at it and I'd go, I'm going to work there one day. I'm going to work there one day. Well, sure enough, when after I left Martin's office and opened my own law practice, I had a trial here against Miss Annette Fontana, our clerk of court, who was working for the DA's office that time, and I beat her. And I'm the kind of person, you fight fair on the field, but you hug neck and kiss cheek afterwards. And Cam and Christine came and watched that trial. And afterwards, they recruited me to come. They said, have you ever thought of switching to the other side? And would you come work for us? I said, yes, and where do I sign? So when I came into Cam's office, I saw all the heads on the wall, and I said, I'm home. This is definitely peace on the bayou. So I've been working at the DA's office for 8.5 years. Loved every minute of it. Started March 11th, 2014. Best day of my life. Every year, March 11th, I send Cam a text and say, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And what was cute is when I went and met with them, Christine said, what's your long-term goal? And I said, to be judge. And I said, wait a minute, what's your long-term goal, Christine? And she said, to be DA. So we got one of them, now we need two.
And you're here, and you're running for judge.
And I love it. I love every second of it.
Okay, let me ask you this. 36 years old, you decided to go to law school.
Uh-huh.
I know you do a great job at the DA's office. I know you love the DA's office because I've interviewed you before. Mm-hmm. What is the attraction to be a judge?
The attraction is much like teaching. I think being a judge is just like being a great teacher, because if you can run a classroom well, you can run a courtroom well, and that's why I like it. Moving it to the professor stage, which is that judge knowing what's going on in the courtroom, keeping control of the inmates in the box, the inmates on Zoom, making sure the lawyers are on point, focused, on time, where they're supposed to be. And the main attraction is, I've worked so much with victims and I've heard their stories and seen their frustration. I've also worked with defendants who have who want to get the process rolling, because justice delayed is justice denied. So it's very important that a judge is mindful of all the parties, the defendants, the prosecutor, the victims, that you see the big picture, the community. For instance, I've seen numerous times a defendant will come up and they'll have a possession of meth charge, okay? And the judge will say, oh, that's just a possession charge. It doesn't, they've had 5 before. It's just a possession. We'll just give them a slap on the wrist. Well, they don't realize is the officers that went into making that case, the neighborhood that is sick of seeing the cars coming through the neighborhoods, stopping at a house for 5 minutes and then on their way. Well, they're buying drugs. That judge needs to realize the impact that the community suffers from just one person. It's not just a possession charge. It's the family that's having to deal with a loved one. And I know you cannot love somebody to sobriety. You cannot order someone to sobriety. That person has to have what I call a come to Jesus moment and decide they want to change their lives. And oftentimes, jail is the place for them to possibly have that come to Jesus moment. Now people say, oh, you just want to put everybody in jail. What are we going to pay for all that incarceration? Well, darling, don't you think you were paying for them beforehand? Don't think that you weren't, because you were. A judge is a judge. That's the end of the road. A judge needs to remember the role, to stay in his or her lane, that you're not a therapist, you're not a social worker, you're a judge. Also, being a teacher for 11 years, I know that if a juvenile comes into court for bad behavior at school, that child has had every opportunity for success from their teacher, from the guidance counselor, from the SRO, assistant principal. That school is sending that child to that judge to have something done for accountability, for actions, not just a slap on the wrist, to have the parents and the child have accountability. So I come to it with that mindset, knowing the impact that one unruly student can have on a classroom can change the whole demeanor. So my teaching experience informs what I would be as a judge, and my prosecution experience informs what I would be a judge, and my time as a defense lawyer informs my time as a judge. And I just cannot wait. This is what I want. My mom, who she passed away, I think it's been, she passed away September the 10th. So it's a little over a month now. This was always her, it was always her dream that I either become a judge or Barbara Walters. So she's what sustains me. I haven't even had time in this process to grieve her. So after the election on November 11th, I'm heading out of town to a cabin in the woods on about 10 acres that I rented with a stocked pond. So I'm going to sleep, fish, and hopefully have some time to just reflect and go through the grieving process of that.
You like to fish?
I love to fish. I'll fish for anything that bites. Saltwater, freshwater, whatever.
All right, let me ask you this. And what I know about lawyering, and what I know about the judges, and what I know about the courtroom and the way all of that works, you could probably put right there on my little short fingernail on my little finger. But I always hear about a judge being fair and impartial.
Correct.
Okay. How in the heck do you do that?
Okay, this is how I look at it. Think of it like an umpire calling balls and strikes. You don't want to root for one team or another and call more strikes so that the opposite team does well. You want to be looking at that fair and impartially, meaning with no bias. So let's say Joe Boudreaux comes in front of you. and you're related to Joe Boudreaux, or you know Joe Boudreaux's pie ran and all this stuff. Oh, you come from a good family, Joe Boudreaux. Why are you doing all this? Why? Let's just give you. You don't want to have that familiar relationship or any knowledge. That's why I love the fact that I wasn't born here, because I have a total appreciation. I've appeared in 20 of the 43 judicial districts. I've seen what works and what doesn't work. Not being from here, I have such an appreciation for the wonderfulness of Lafourche Parish that I want to keep it that way. And I don't have any kind of preconceived notions about people, because I don't know who your mama sat next to in second grade, or who your daddy's secretary was, or, you know, grandmother's pie ran. I don't have any of that. So I can look at people and judge them for what they are in front of me. Now, when it comes to sentencing, you're allowed to look at their previous record. Well, the previous record of, that's what really a judge is supposed to look at. And the seriousness of the crime, if there's victims, if it's a crime of violence, and take all that in consideration. Because crimes of violence, which they're listed in RS Revised Statute 14:2, list all the crimes of violence. Those crimes, if you plead guilty to that, you're going to do about 85% of the time. So if it's a 10-year sentence, you're going to do 8.5 years. If it's not a crime of violence, you're only going to do 25. So if it's a 10-year sentence, you're only going to do about 2.5 years. Yes. So a judge needs to be knowledgeable of all that. You can't just say, oh, that's the Department of Corrections. That ain't me. Well, you need to be mindful of that, because if you want to have a meaningful sentence, for example, all these DWI horrific crashes where people are killed, the max is 30 years. Well, if the blood alcohol, and this is getting kind of technical, but if the blood alcohol is below 0.20, it's not a crime of violence. So if you give them the max, they're only going to do approximately 7.5 years. So if they have other charges, if you want more time, you might need to stack that time, run it consecutive. You gotta have a good working knowledge, and I'm the only candidate that has that criminal experience to know that with no learning curve. I can hit the bench running.
How long were you a prosecutor?
8.5 years.
That's a long time.
It is, and I love every second of it, and I'm ready to move on to it.
All right, District Judge, Division A.
Correct.
All of Lafourche Parish?
From the Fouchon to the St. John. Although I had someone make me a sign that said Fouchon, and it had the N crossed out, because this North Louisiana accent says the N. So I guess I'm supposed to say from the Fouchon to the St. John.
Have the Hendrix listeners running for Judge, District Division A, and of course that is Lafourche Parish. That'll be on November 8th, and we urge everybody to vote. I've said this to you a million times. You want your candidate elected, you got to cast a ballot. You want majority rule, you got to cast a ballot. Don't do anything that happened in New Orleans about 8-10 years ago. We elected a U.S. senator with 11% of the vote, of the registered vote. Let's don't let that happen here. Heather Hendrix, thanks a lot for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to meet with you and talk to you and talk to some voters. But like you said, go out and vote. Every vote counts. There, in Baton Rouge, the East Baton Rouge Parish, there was a judge that won by 2 votes, and they even did a recount, and it was still 2 votes. So every vote counts.
Don't tell me your vote don't count.
That's right. Oh, that gave me the free zones when I saw that. I was like, oh.
Miss Heather Hendrix, candidate for District Judge, Division A. Listeners, viewers, thanks for being with us. God bless you today. And we urge you to look for us here on Kbze 105.9 YouTube. Hey everybody, your old friend is back, and I'm keeping up with technology. Hello friends, it's Gene Richard, inviting you to join me for Dialogue, a video and audio podcast presented by Kbze 105.9 FM. Look for the podcast on my Facebook page on the KBZE YouTube page and on the Thibodeau Now Facebook page. The audio podcast will be available on these social media apps, Podbean and TuneIn. Stay up to date with Thibodeau News on Dialogue, the podcast. We're going to change it up once a week and hopefully more as it grows in viewer and listenership.